Welcome, students, staff, guests from the community, and especially our veterans who are joining us for this Veterans Day program. Throughout this nation's great history, America's soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, and Coast Guard have bravely answered the call to duty to defend our freedom, to aid our friends and allies, and to turn back aggressors. We can never fully repay our debt of gratitude to the more than 650,000 American service members who died in battle, or the 1.4 million who have been wounded. We can, however, recognize and thank the 16 million veterans still living today as we honor their patriotic service to our country. Please join me in a round of applause as we recognize all those who have answered the call to serve our great country. Please rise for the presentation of the colors by VFW Post 7929 and the American Legion Post 169 and stay standing for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Rifle squad, right shoulder, arms. Veterans, forward at the slow pace, march. Left, 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 right, left, 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 right, left, left. Color guard, post colors. Forward.
Ms. Kylie Birch, HS Student Council President, will now lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Veterans, seats.
You may be seated. At this time, I am honored to introduce Mr. Mark Starsky of the American Legion and Dave Porter of the VFW, who will be making some special presentations in recognition of local men and women who served in Vietnam.
Good morning. Sure, I know what you're thinking. Another old guy that's going to talk about, a long story, but I'm going to keep this short. My name is Mark Starsky. As Josh said, I'm the commander of the Amery American Legion Post 169, and with me is Dave Porter. Dave is the commander of the VFW Post 7929 here in Amery. And on behalf of all of our veterans here today, we'd like to thank you for sharing part of your day with us. I ask for your attention for just a short time as I give you a brief history lesson and invite you to join me in righting a wrong that happened over 50 years ago. And this is very important, and I really ask for your participation in this. U.S. involvement in the Vietnam War ran from November 1st of 1955 to May 15th of 1975. more than 2.7 million Americans served in Vietnam, with 153,000 wounded, while 2,646 remain unaccounted for, and sadly, 58,220 have lost their lives. To my right are the boots, helmets, rifle, and dog tags that represent a service member that has lost their life for our country. This stands as a reminder that our freedom is not free. Vietnam had a great impact on our society like never before. It changed the way people lived and related to one another. Protests against the war began on college campuses in the 60s and spread throughout the country. It was a time of turmoil and unrest in our country. This division turned against our troops as they returned home. Our troops were disrespected, a homecoming they truly did not deserve. These men and women answered their country's call. They did not run, they did not hide, they served their country. Today we will recognize Vietnam veterans that served in Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia, and Thailand with a Vietnam veteran lapel pin as a lasting memento of our nation's gratitude. This pin displays an eagle representing courage and honor, dedication to our nation. The back of the pin states, "A grateful nation thanks and honors you." Let me introduce the Vietnam veterans who are with us today. As I call your name, please come forward. They will present you with the pin, and I ask that you remain standing here with us. Jim Adams. Dan Gillespie. Gary Hover. Steve Lutz. Mark Jacobson. And Steve Scheider. Thank you, gentlemen. Grateful Nation thanks and honors you. We welcome you all to homecoming you never received. Thank you.
At this time, we'll have our first musical selection by the Amery High School Choir under the direction of Mrs. Carrie Moskal, entitled "Oh America."
Thank you so much. That was a beautiful song, choir. It is my honor today to introduce our guest speaker, United States Marine Captain Jim Adams. His story started out similar to how many of yours will. Captain Adams was a graduate of Amery High School in 1963. He was active in multiple clubs and activities. He was captain of an undefeated conference championship football team. He was captain of the wrestling team and qualified for state 2 times at a time when there was only a single division in the state of Wisconsin. He also lettered 4 years in track. He attended college at UWEC, attending boot camps in the summer, and entered the Marines when the U.S. was actively involved in the Vietnam War. While in the Marines, he was awarded 28 Distinguished Flying Cross medals. You are awarded 1 medal for every 20 missions you complete. I'll let you do the math on that. As I got to know him over the years, what really impressed me with Captain Adams was how humble this man was, a trait that we could all use a little bit more of. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me in welcoming Captain Jim Adams.
Before Jim gives his speech, I have one more announcement to make. We have a saying in the military, leave no man behind. And I accidentally left one of our Vietnam veterans behind, so Keith, if you would please approach. Where do you go?
Cheaters on here so I can see my notes. Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Mr. Gould, for that gracious introduction. As noted, I am an Amery local, graduated high school in '63 when I was 18. I just turned 79 years old. I thought I'd start by taking a minute to explain to you the history of Veterans Day, if you don't know that already. I'm somewhat of a history buff. One of my 2 daughters once told me that the reason I like history is that back when I was taking history in school, there wasn't as much of it to learn. Probably true. I lived through a lot of the 20th and 21st century history. So we start. War broke out in Europe in 1914, 109 years ago. The United States entered the war in 1917. It would later become known as World War I. But of course, we didn't know back at that time that we were going to have to number our world wars. So it was generally called the Great War, or naively enough, the war to end all wars. In 1917, United States Army General John J. Pershing was sent to France in command of the American Expeditionary Force, a grand title for an Army division, reinforced with 2 regiments of Marines. Our forces joined the Allies in France, Great Britain, and other Western European countries against Germany. The Germans surrendered in the summer of 1918. The peace treaty, or armistice as it was called back then, was to be signed in Paris that fall. The French, who have always had a flair for the dramatic, set the treaty signing to be held in the Hall of Mirrors at the Palace of Versailles, and it was to occur on the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month of 1918, November 11th. Back in the United States, President Woodrow Wilson declared November 11th to be observed as Armistice Day, and in 1926, Congress made it a national holiday. The peace that followed the war to end all wars only lasted a short 20 years before World War II broke out in Europe. It started for the United States on December 7th, 1941, when the Japanese attacked our naval base at Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. It ended with the dropping of atomic bombs on the Japanese cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki in August of '45. After all of this, our servicemen and women returned from that war, and 5 years later were fighting in a police action in Korea from 1950 to '53. Another very bloody conflict. After all of this, having a national holiday commemorating the armistice of World War I seemed to be out of step with the times. So in 1954, November 11 was formally declared Veterans Day to recognize those who served in the defense of our freedom in all conflicts. I think that's your history lesson for this one. All of the veterans assembled before you today have individual stories they could share about their military experiences. Many of them, no doubt, more interesting than mine. But I have been asked to tell you a bit about my 7 years in the United States Marine Corps. As Mr. Gould mentioned, it started in 1965 as a sophomore at the University of Wisconsin-Eau Claire. I decided to join a Marine Corps Reserve program while attending college. The next summers, I attended boot camp and officer candidate school in Quantico, Virginia, and upon graduation from Eau Claire was commissioned a second lieutenant in the United States Marine Corps. At my swearing in, I was given orders to report to Pensacola Naval Air Station, Florida, for flight training. The Marine Corps and Coast Guard are organized under the Navy Department, and their pilots are trained at the Navy Flight School. The next 16 months, I was trained in fixed wing as well as helicopter aircraft and attended intensive ground school classes. For most pilots, perhaps the highlight of the entire program was aircraft carrier qualifications. In this stage of training, we were flying T-28 fixed-wing propeller-driven aircraft, similar to World War II fighters, and still being used then by some Third World Air Forces. After a few weeks of practicing simulated landings on a flight deck painted on a runway, we were ready for the real thing. A solo flight rendezvousing with an aircraft carrier at sea. In my case, it was the USS Essex in the Gulf of Mexico. Part of the exercise, of course, was to find the ship, using the navigational training we had received, then finding your way back home. The ship was over the horizon, out to sea 50 miles or so, not easy as it sounds before GPS and modern navigation was invented. I found the Essex, made radio contact, made 5 successful arrested landings, called traps, which was the required number to qualify. Hooking a cable from 120 miles an hour to a dead stop in 50 feet is quite a ride. I returned safely to Pensacola. After flight school, I went to Marine Corps Air Station Santa Ana, California, and transitioned into an operational helicopter squadron. From there, in the summer of 1969, I received orders to report to Fleet Marine Force Westpac. Westpac is Navy talk for Western Pacific, and for Marines it meant Vietnam. I'll take a minute to explain a bit about what was going on there, as that predates everyone here in the high school. Vietnam was a French colony called French Indochina before World War II. Communist rebellion swept through Asia in the late 40s and 50s. In Vietnam, Communist leader Ho Chi Minh fought the French army to a standstill in 1954, and a ceasefire was agreed to that divided the country in half. Ho Chi Minh set up a communist government in the north, and a democratic republic was established in the south. North Vietnam almost immediately started sending soldiers across the demilitarized zone into the south to try to take down that government and reunify the country under communist control. The United States started sending military advisors to help train South Vietnamese troops by the mid-50s, and soon were joining them on patrols and taking part in combat. These Army Special Forces troops, the famous Green Berets. By 1965, it was evident that the South Vietnamese would be unable to defend themselves without additional help from us. That year, President Lyndon Johnson authorized a massive U.S. troop buildup that hit a high point in 1969 of 543,000 American combat troops in country. Back to my story. After a month of jungle survival training in the Philippines, I checked into Marine Transport Helicopter Squadron 161 in Phu Bai, Vietnam in October of 1969. Our mission was to support the 1st Marine Division ground forces in their deployment in the northernmost sector of South Vietnam. This area, assigned to the Marines, was basically the northern third of a country that is a rather narrow strip of land along the ocean. The demilitarized zone, the border with North Vietnam, was to the north, and the country of Laos to the west. The Marines' mission was to intercept North Vietnamese soldiers and supplies heading into the country to resupply their guerrilla forces fighting against our allies, the Democratic Republic of Vietnam in the south. All of the towns and villages are located along the coastline in this area. A few miles inland from the sea, you enter a roadless expanse of mountainous tropical jungle. The Marines established mountaintop artillery outposts throughout this area. Small bulldozers and artillery pieces were airlifted in by heavy lift helicopters to establish these outposts. All the food, supplies, ammunition, and replacement troops had to be brought in by helicopter. That was one of my squadron's primary jobs. Patrols were sent out from these outposts to locate infiltration routes through the jungle used by the North Vietnamese and staging areas for their supplies. Artillery or aerial bombardment would then be called in to destroy them. We also flew medical evacuation flights, medevacs, delivering wounded Marines from the jungle to field hospitals at regimental headquarters camps. The more seriously wounded were taken to a hospital ship. There were 2 hospital ships that took turns rotating between their home port at Subic Bay in the Philippine Islands and on station in the South China Sea just off our coastline, the USS Sanctuary and the USS Repose. They looked just like a civilian ocean liner, except that they were painted all white with 2 red crosses painted on either side. These ships were Stage 1 trauma centers with fully equipped and staffed operating rooms and intensive care wards. The wounded that made it to the hospital ship had an excellent chance of survival. After Vietnam, I received orders to Camp Lejeune, North Carolina. I checked into my new squadron at New River Air Station, adjacent to Lejeune, just as that squadron was preparing to deploy to the Mediterranean Sea as part of the U.S. 6th Fleet, headquartered in Naples, Italy. I went aboard the aircraft carrier USS Guam and operated aboard her for 6 months in the Mediterranean. Upon return to North Carolina, I was an instructor pilot, working with new pilots just out of Pensacola, transitioning them into tactical flight operations. I was honorably discharged at the rank of captain in the summer of 1972 and returned home. That is my military story in capsule form. I hope you found it interesting. I would venture to guess that everyone has somewhat different motivations for joining the military service. The personal challenge, the adventure, the technical training offered, GI benefits for further education. But one common thread will probably be found in all. It's the respect for our common values as a democracy and a willing to come forward and defend those values should the need arise. I think that could be called patriotism. As the saying goes, freedom is not free. One final thought I would leave with you. It is always nice to hear, thank you for your service. There is, however, more importantly, a way you can thank those who made the ultimate sacrifice and didn't make it back home as we did. You can thank them by being good citizens of this great democracy. Be informed about your government. Follow the news. When you are of age, vote in local, state, and national elections. Be involved. Do this, and you will be thanking those who sacrificed everything to give you the privilege of a free and open society. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Captain Adams. At this time, the Amery Band, directed by Ms. Meredith Rhodes Lundgren, will play a selection entitled Marches of the Armed Forces. We ask all military members to please stand when your song is played. United States Army. United States Coast Guard. United States Air Force. The United States Navy. Would everyone please rise now for the Star Spangled Banner? of our ceremony, we will now have the silence to the fallen comrades in arms, and then the playing of taps by Tia Lochner and Zach Osro before retiring the colors.
Right, fall in. Left, eight. Good, fine. Next slide. Halt. Ladies and gentlemen, to my right are the boots, rifle, helmet, and dog tags. This is the symbol of a fallen service. These are his comrades. We will now render a salute to our departed comrades by firing 3 volleys, then playing taps. Last slide. Prepare fire. Ready. Aim. Fire. Aim. Fire. Aim. Fire. Reset. Halt. Red flag, volley. Good, march. Live, 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 run, live, live. Live, run, live, live. Halt. Follow. Color guard, retrieve colors. Veterans will fall in behind them once the colors are retrieved. Color guard, forward march. Left, 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 right, left. Ready? Halt. Veterans, please fall in. At the slow pace, forward, march. Left, 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 right, left, left, left. Ready? Halt.
of applause for our veterans.